My wife said, "I regret marrying you every single day." I didn't argue, I just helped her pack. I am a 31-year-old man, and the night my wife told me she regretted marrying me every single day, I stopped trying to correct history. I did not make a speech. I did not ask for proof. I listened to the sentence land, I let it decide the room, and then I folded her sweaters into a suitcase because I refused to add noise to a moment that finally spoke clearly. We had been married for 3 years. We met through a friend who said we were both steady people who liked quiet plans. She admired my patience. I admired her drive. We started with simple Saturdays, split grocery lists, shared podcasts, then a small apartment we painted together in a shade the hardware store called Early Morning. I believed the tone we set then would carry us through anything. I confused good intentions for structure. The first cracks were private and easy to dismiss. She began framing my habits as obstacles. She said I moved too slowly, thought too practically, dreamed too small. She wanted bigger weekends, brighter furniture, faster decisions. I kept writing numbers beside ideas because that had always kept me safe. She started calling my caution controlling. I told myself language stretches when people are tired. I made excuses for the name-calling because it never arrived as a scream, it arrived as a sigh during dishes, a raised eyebrow over bills, a joke at a table where people laughed to be polite. Money tightened like winter. Rent went up. She shifted jobs twice for better titles and worse stability. I took on extra projects, brought work home, and swallowed my pride when my back ached from the second chair I still couldn't afford to replace. She said I was cheap. I said I was careful. She said careful equals dull. I said dull equals peaceful. We did not convince each other. We tried counseling. The counselor asked us to describe respect in actions. I said respect was naming limits before crossing them. She said respect was believing in someone's future without asking for proof. The counselor nodded like both truths mattered and then asked us to practice curiosity instead of defense. I tried. She did not. After the third session she said therapy felt like being graded by a stranger and that the right couple does not need a referee. I wanted to disagree, but I saw the look on her face, the one that told me debate would not create oxygen, and I let it go. Her family loved performance. Dinners were stages. People competed with stories, volume, and brands. I arrived with quiet news, a certification passed, a project delivered, a good review, and watched it sink under new phones and destination weekends. She leaned into that world as if it were a safety net. She came home carrying its rules, the unspoken ones that measure love by headline moments. My plain updates did not trend there. The night of the sentence, she had come back from a friend's rooftop where the view is rented to impress. She smelled like other people's champagne and new plans. I had made a simple dinner, the kind we used to enjoy, and told her I had finally paid off an old loan. She said debt-free sounded like a small man's trophy. Then she said the line about regret, placed it on the table like a card, and watched me. I looked at the fork in my hand and understood I had reached a fork somewhere else. I stood, cleared plates, and asked her which suitcase she preferred. She laughed the way people laugh when they think you're bluffing. I carried the suitcase to the bedroom. I opened drawers. I folded. Helping her pack was not kindness. It was clarity. Every shirt that left the dresser showed me a space I had been trying to ignore. I found a passport sleeve with train tickets tucked inside for a weekend that had never included me. I found a spare key I didn't recognize. I found a lease application with the marital status box empty and the employer contact line filled with a new company I'd only heard briefly over dishes. I placed each discovery in a neat pile and kept packing. When she finally realized I was not performing, she told me I was dramatic. I said I was done trying to fix a sentence with more sentences. I slept on the couch. In the morning I made coffee because my hands needed tasks. She rolled her suitcase through the hall, took her jacket without looking at me, and said she would stay with a friend for now. I nodded. She left. The lock clicked. The apartment exhaled. I sat with my mug until the heat left, then I opened the laptop because feelings did not absolve me from practical work. I checked the joint account first. The emergency fund had taken a hit labeled temporary. 2 transfers had moved into her personal account overnight. The amounts matched the deposit requirements for the sublet application tucked in that sleeve. I printed statements, highlighted dates, and wrote "Seen" beside them in pencil like a clerk who refuses to be bullied by tone. I checked utilities, rent, the service subscriptions that look small until you add them. I paused when I reached the health insurance line. She had changed the plan last week and removed spousal coverage. The effective date matched her rooftop night. I read it 3 times. I wanted to rage. I did not. I made a list called "Today" and another called "After." Today meant freezing the savings so neither of us could unilaterally bleed the account. Today meant emailing the landlord about notice periods instead of waiting for rumor to do the job. Today meant moving anything uniquely mine, documents, photos, the old watch my father gave me, into one drawer so I would not search for myself later in boxes that no longer belonged to us. Her mother called by lunch. She asked whether I had upset her daughter. She asked it in the voice people use when they already chose a side and want confirmation. I said we were taking space and arranging practical matters. She said marriage means weathering storms. I said storms and contempt are different weather systems, and a roof designed for rain will not survive a match. She sighed theatrically and said I was giving up too easily. I looked at the map I had drafted on the table and saw the impossible navigation and felt strangely calm. The friend she was staying with sent a message that said she needed time and fewer logistics. He asked me not to contact her unless it was urgent. I responded with 3 bullet points: rent, insurance, move-out timetable. He responded with a thumbs up. I learned something useful: some people process someone else's marriage like a customer service ticket. It helped to see it that way. I wrote the ticket number in my head and continued. 2 days later, a man knocked to read the meter. He glanced at boxes and asked if we were moving. I said yes. He said he sees this kind of thing a lot. I did not ask him to explain. I watched him write down numbers and sign a form that looked strangely dignified because it was honest. I signed too. The relief of accurate paperwork surprised me. Truth is heavy, but at least it has shape. In the quiet hours between admin and sleep, my brain tried to replay happier scenes and edit them for warnings. I remembered a weekend away where she refused to pose for a photo unless the background looked expensive. I remembered a time she said she had never pictured herself with someone so local, then laughed and said she meant rooted. I remembered how my monthly transfers to savings stopped reading as security to her and started reading as smallness. None of those moments were crimes. Together they were a slow rebrand of me that I had agreed to because I thought love could outpace story. On the 4th day I opened the shared tablet to remove my accounts and saw a draft email addressed to a recruiter. It described her plan to relocate within a week, it listed a furnished studio near the office, and it included a line about no ties. No ties is a phrase that works in ads and hurts in kitchens. I closed the draft and finished removing my logins. I left one note in the Notes app labeled Practical, with 3 items: date for the walkthrough, balance owed for rent, and the precise figure withdrawn from the emergency fund. I used neutral words. I did not ask questions. I wrote, "Please confirm by Friday." She did not confirm by Friday. She sent a short transfer tagged "My share" that did not match the number on my list. The memo repeated the word temporary. I made a copy for the file and replied with the exact remainder and a new due date. I added a single sentence that said I would consider the debt formal if the balance remained after that date. I felt mean writing it, then remembered the word regret and the health insurance change and found my hand grow steady again. I spent the weekend packing my own things and noticing how much of a shared home is made of duplicates. 2 spatulas. 2 mugs we never used. 2 versions of a future printed on canvases from discount sites. I kept 1 plate, 1 pan, 1 glass. The cupboard looked cleaner and sadder. I told myself that sadness is not always a problem to fix, sometimes it is the fee you pay to avoid debt you cannot keep carrying. Sunday evening, I placed her remaining mail on the table and saw a letter from the insurance plan. It confirmed the change and mentioned a waiting period. I signed my own enrollment with my employer and paid the higher premium without drama because being uninsured would have been louder. I attached the receipt to my file and put the letter in an envelope labeled hers. I slept better than the night before. Not good. Better. When Monday arrived, I wore a shirt with intact seams, answered emails, and finished a report with tidy columns. My boss told me I looked focused. I said work helps. He did not pry. People who respect privacy save you energy you can use for survival. After lunch, the landlord replied to my earlier message with a walk-through date and a note about repairs. I confirmed. I forwarded the details to her with 3 bullet points and no commentary. She sent a single line that said, "I'll be there if I can." I replied with the time and the address as if she had forgotten both. That night I stood in the kitchen and looked at the white ring on the table where her mug had lived. I thought about the way contempt rearranges air and then asks the other person to apologize for breathing it. I thought about the way a single sentence can clean a window and show you a view you refuse to see. I thought about the train tickets, the key, the empty box on a form, the health insurance checkbox, the emergency fund, the word regret, the way my hands had not shaken while I folded her sweaters. I realized I had been mourning a future that required me to disappear in order to exist. I realized disappearing slowly is still disappearing. I realized I had done the hardest thing already. I had stayed calm when the house demanded a fire. The rest would be lists. Lists I could do. I printed a calendar, drew boxes around the next 4 weeks, and wrote neat ink inside each one. I looked at the plan and felt my lungs open. Not in triumph. In maintenance. I went to bed. I slept. She arrived for the walk-through 5 minutes late with sunglasses on and a friendliness that worked well in rooms where people didn't know the price of it. She said she hoped we could do this without turning into enemies. I said I wanted accuracy. The landlord checked corners with a penlight, made a note about a loose handle, and said the deposit would be returned within 2 weeks minus a small repair. She nodded like someone in a meeting. We signed. She left quickly, promising a transfer this week. I watched the elevator doors close and felt a chapter shutting without a final paragraph. There were still numbers to settle. I sent a concise summary with the remaining rent balance, the utility prorations, the exact figure missing from the emergency fund, and the insurance premium difference I had absorbed after her change. I attached copies. I included a simple plan, 2 transfers within 30 days, no interest, acknowledgement sent upon completion. I used the same subject line as always so the thread was a straight line. I pressed send, then I walked to a cheap cafe and drank tea like it was medicine. Her response arrived at midnight with the familiar mix of grievance and bargaining. She said I was punishing her for being honest about her feelings. She said I should let go because we both needed to heal. She said money had always been my obsession. She offered half of the missing emergency fund and nothing for insurance because life happens. I reread the message and recognized the tactic, push the conflict into tone and out of math. I refused the detour. I replied with the same 4 numbers and the same 2 deadlines. I added that partial payments would not erase the remainder. I avoided adjectives. I slept anyway. On day 6, a transfer landed covering rent and utilities. The memo said, no interest. I smiled at the unintentional joke and marked the ledger. On day 10, nothing came. I sent a reminder that sounded like every reminder I'd ever sent, including ones about watering the plants when we still said goodnight. On day 13, she wrote that her relocation stipend had been delayed and asked for another week. I granted 5 days and wrote, "Final," beside it in my head. The second payment arrived on day 18 from her father's account with a note that said, "For peace." I filed it and prepared the acknowledgement. I could have added the insurance premium again, pressed that last button, demanded the entire figure for the emergency fund. I didn't. Not because I changed my mind, but because peace is a line item too, and sometimes it's cheaper than the last round of rightness. I sent a one-page acknowledgement that the account was settled, that no further claims would follow, that I wished her well. I printed a copy and put it in a folder called "Closed." With the ledger quiet, grief grew louder. It didn't roar. It sighed. It played old scenes on a loop, her falling asleep on my shoulder during a long bus ride, me teaching her how to set up an automatic transfer, both of us laughing because we burned pancakes on a Sunday and ate them anyway. Memory is generous with sweet cuts when it knows you survived the deep one. I let it play and then I stood up and washed dishes. I moved into a smaller place with light that understood mornings. I bought furniture slowly and without apology. One plate. One pan. One chair that supported my back. A desk that did not wobble. I set my routine like rails: wake, pray, move, work, cook, call, read, sleep. I kept a small notebook where I wrote 3 lines each night, one fact, one feeling, one plan. I learned that steady is not boring when you build it yourself. It is the opposite of fear. The messages from her shifted. First came the defensive ones: I had been impossible, I had smothered, I had demanded proof for everything. Then came silence. Then a short note months later that read like a confession without a direct object. She wrote that she had been unkind, that the new job was loud, that she was learning how admiration turns into contempt when you confuse novelty for growth. She did not ask to come back. She did not ask for absolution. She wished me well. I read it once and replied with 3 sentences: "Thank you for paying what you owed, I hope you find what you need, take care." I did not add a paragraph. I did not reopen a door. My mother asked if I had forgiven. I told her forgiveness for me was not a yes/no toggle, it was a series of locks I was learning how to open without breaking the door. Some days I could turn one. Some days my hands were tired. She nodded and slid a bowl of fruit toward me the way mothers turn philosophy into vitamins. My father asked about my sleep and my savings target. That is how he says he loves me. Work expanded. I took on a difficult client whose books were a mess of assumptions and missing receipts. I did what I'd done at my own table, built a timeline, filled in cells with neat truths, refused to let tone erase math. When we signed off on the cleaned file, the client said I had saved her from a slow disaster. I biked home and said a quiet thank you to the version of me who had learned to breathe through accusations instead of arguing with them. Now and then I heard about my ex through the neighborhood grapevine that travels faster than buses. She had moved again, then again. She posted photos with captions about reinvention and flight. Good for her, I thought, without meaning either malice or blessing. Flight is a skill. Landing is, too. I was practicing the second. Once I saw her across a street at a light. She looked over, not at me but through me, the way you look through a window at a restaurant you might try someday. The signal changed. People moved. We passed without a word. I did not feel small. I felt placed. I had stopped living in wishful edits of our past and started living inside the page I was on. I kept one object from our marriage, a small note she wrote early on thanking me for fixing a wobbly table and for caring about boring details. I did not keep it out of nostalgia. I kept it as a mirror for the part of me that had been targeted and then doubted itself. Caring about boring details is how my life works. It is how bills are paid, trust is built, and storms are named before they knock out power. It is not romantic. It is protective. I taped the note inside a drawer and forgot about it until the day I needed it. If someone asks what happened, I keep it short. I say contempt moved in and I moved out. I say she had a plan she didn't share. I say I did not argue with a sentence that finally told the truth. I packed, I invoiced what mattered, I closed the books, I opened a new one. There is no revenge ending. There is no speech on a stage. There is the quiet of a kitchen where the table is steady because someone tightened the screws and the person sitting there knows the value of breath that isn't owed to anyone else's comfort. I am not proud of every moment. I am proud of the calm. I am proud that I did not make a scene to earn sympathy from people who would forget next week. I am proud that every euro had a receipt, that every message had a date, that every decision had a line I could read later without wincing. I am proud that I helped her pack without using my hands to hurt anything. The apartment smells like coffee and laundry soap now. I replaced the mug ring on the table with a coaster because small fixes are still fixes. I open the window in the morning and let air in without checking if it will be used against me. I walk after dinner and nod at neighbors who do not need to know my story to wave back. I am not rebuilding a brand. I am building a life. It will not trend. It will last. If you ever hear someone tell you that your breathing makes them sick, or that loving you is a daily regret, here is what I learned: you do not need to argue with weather. You need to get your documents in order, your dignity in one hand, and your keys in the other. You need to choose the version of yourself that can live with tomorrow. The rest is packing. The rest is receipts. The rest is sleep that finally arrives because you put out the fire without setting a bigger one to feel brave. I helped her pack because I refused to carry her sentence any farther. I closed the door gently. I breathed on purpose. I am still here. That is the whole ending and the beginning.
Follow me for more stories.